Slap. I'll never forget that sound. My wife's head snapping sideways, the crack echoing down our quiet street like a gunshot. Some piece of trash in a fake police uniform just backhanded Diana so hard that blood started trickling from her split lip. This wannabe cop thinks he just won. Look at him strutting back to his unmarked car like he's hot shit, probably thinking he just taught the troublemaker's wife a lesson. Here's what this moron doesn't know, what the psycho HOA president who hired him doesn't know. They just made the biggest mistake of their pathetic lives. The woman steadying herself against our doorframe, wiping blood from her mouth. She's not some helpless suburban housewife. She's the elected sheriff of this entire county. And when she reaches into her jacket and shows him her real badge, their little intimidation game is about to become a federal case. What would you do if someone assaulted your spouse? Tell me in the comments. My name is Marcus Delacroix, and I'm about to tell you how my HOA president hired a fake cop to slap my wife around, not knowing she's the actual county sheriff. But let me back up. 18 months ago, Diana and I thought we'd found paradise. I'm 43, Desert Storm veteran, been running my own contracting business for 15 years. Diana's 41, been in law enforcement since she was 26, just got elected sheriff 6 months back. We'd saved every penny to buy our dream house in Willowbrook Estates using my VA loan. The place was perfect craftsman-style home, 2-car garage, manicured lawns that smelled like jasmine every morning instead of the exhaust fumes from Diana's old apartment near the precinct. We figured the HOA dues were worth it for a community this nice. Then we met our HOA president. Bethany Whitmore-Chen is every nightmare HOA story you've ever heard, rolled into one perfectly manicured monster. She's 52, drives a white BMW with vanity plates reading HOARESQN because she thinks she's clever and treats our neighborhood like her personal kingdom. Former real estate lawyer with that sugar-sweet voice that somehow sounds more threatening than a death threat. The war started 3 weeks after we moved in. I parked my work truck, a perfectly legal Ford F-150 registered as a personal vehicle, in my own damn driveway. Next morning, there's a violation notice under my windshield wiper. The paper felt expensive, heavy cardstock like a wedding invitation. Notice of covenant violation, it read. Commercial vehicles prohibited per CC&R section 12.3. I laughed it off. My truck was under the weight limit, properly registered, and I'd checked those HOA rules twice before buying. So I walked over to Bethany's house, the one with roses that probably cost more than most people's cars, to clear up the misunderstanding. Huge mistake. Bethany opened her door in a silk robe, wearing a smile that could cut glass. Behind me, her sprinkler system was hitting my truck, this rhythmic pinging against the metal that would become the soundtrack to our nightmare. "Mr. Delacroix," she said, butchering my name on purpose. "I'm sure you think you're right. But I've managed this community for 8 years. Commercialt activities lower property values. Your business needs to operate elsewhere." Door slammed. Deadbolt clicked like a judge's gavel. That afternoon's second violation notice. Day after that third notice. Daily fines of $150 would start in 7 days unless my commercial activity ceased immediately. Diana came home to find me surrounded by HOA documents and county records at our kitchen table. Her duty belt creaked as she sat down leather against leather, the sound she makes transitioning from Sheriff Diana to my wife. "They can't do this," I said, sliding the notices across. "I checked everything. My truck's completely legal." Diana picked up the violations with those sharp detective eyes. Within seconds, she caught something I'd missed. The complaint reference numbers were sequential, filed minutes apart. Someone had been watching our house, timing their attack. "This isn't about your truck," she said quietly. "This is about control. Someone wants us gone." She was right. What we didn't know yet was how much money Bethany stood to make by forcing us out, or how far she'd go to get it. See, Diana keeps her home address classified for obvious reasons. When you've spent 15 years putting drug dealers and domestic abusers behind bars, you don't advertise where you sleep. Bethany probably figured we were just another couple she could bully into submission. She had no idea she'd picked a fight with the one person in the county who had both the legal authority and the investigative skills to destroy her. Outside, those sprinklers kept hitting my truck every morning at exactly 6 a.m. Bethany had reprogrammed them personally. The sound of water hitting metal became our wake-up call to war. Bethany's first real attack hit me where it hurt most, my livelihood. I was elbow deep in Mrs. Peterson's Honda engine, sweat dripping onto the hot metal, when this city building inspector materialized like a bad omen. Official clipboard, that bureaucratic dead stare, the whole intimidation package. Marcus Delacroix, anonymous complaint about unpermitted electrical work at this location. I straightened up, wiping grease off my hands. Sir, I'm doing a C repair. Haven't touched a single wire and my licenses are current. He slapped a stop work order into my palm. The paper was still warm from the printer. Someone had rushed this through the system the second they saw my truck in Mrs. Peterson's driveway. Complaint says you're rewiring without permits. Gotta shut you down until we sort this mess out. Mrs. Peterson shuffled outside in her house slippers, wringing her hands. What's wrong? It's supposed to hit 98 degrees today. I'm sorry, ma'am. City won't let me touch your AC until this gets cleared up. Could take weeks. I watched $3,200 walk away. Mrs. Peterson was sweet about it, but she couldn't survive this heat. By evening, she'd hired another contractor who left a 1-star Google review claiming I'd abandoned a vulnerable senior citizen during a dangerous heat wave. That night, I found myself smoking my first cigarette in 3 years on our back patio. The nicotine burned my throat like liquid failure. Diana appeared beside me, still in her sheriff's uniform, badge catching the porch light. Show me everything. Now. I pulled up the city complaint on my phone, filed at 11:47 a.m. from a concerned neighbor, reporting obvious electrical violations creating fire hazards. Timeline was perfect 23 minutes after I'd arrived at Mrs. Peterson's. Someone was watching me, I said. Diana scrolled through our Ring doorbell footage like she was hunting a serial killer. Her finger froze on Tuesday morning's video. There was Bethany, bold as brass, standing on our sidewalk photographing my truck with her phone. Got you, you manipulative bitch, Diana muttered under her breath. Now, my contractor buddy Jake had warned me about this exact situation years ago. He'd fought his own HOA battle and learned the hard way that these boards have to follow corporate governance rules just like any other business. Document every interaction, he told me over beers, because patterns of harassment hold up in court. I was about to put that advice to the test. I filed a harassment complaint the next morning, citing specific CC&R violations about member conduct. Requested formal mediation per community guidelines. Did everything by the book, dotted every I, crossed every T. Bethany's response was swift and dirty. She called an emergency board meeting for that evening, changed the venue to her house, conveniently forgot to notify the 2 neutral board members, and stacked the deck with her 3 puppets. I showed up anyway. Had to park 3 blocks away because her driveway looked like a German luxury car dealership. The meeting was in her pristine living room, all white furniture and pretentious art that screamed, "I have money but no soul." The air reeked of expensive vanilla candles trying to mask the stench of corruption. Marcus, Bethany purred, not bothering to stand. How lovely that you could attend our little gathering. She'd prepared a presentation that would have made a prosecutor proud. Poster-sized photos of my truck taken with a wide-angle lens to make it look like I was parking an 18-wheeler in my driveway. As you can clearly see, she announced to her nodding puppets, Mr. Delacroix's commercial vehicle creates safety hazards and obstructs pedestrian access to our sidewalks. Pure bullshit, and everyone knew it. My truck was legally parked in my own driveway, blocking absolutely nothing. But her 3 board lackeys performed their scripted responses. Very concerning. Clear violation. Property values at serious risk. Vote 4-1 to begin daily fines of $150 until my commercial activities ceased. The lone dissenter was Janet Morrison, a retired teacher with actual integrity. This is textbook selective enforcement, Janet protested. Half this neighborhood has work vehicles. Why single out the Delacroix family? Bethany's smile could have frozen lava. The board has spoken, Janet. Democracy in action. Walking back to my truck in the dark, footsteps echoed behind me. Janet caught up, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Marcus, she whispered urgently. You're not the first. The Hendersons, the Chen family, old Mr. Rodriguez all forced out in the past 2 years. Exact same pattern. My stomach dropped. This was the twist I hadn't seen coming. We weren't victims of petty harassment. We were marks in something much bigger. What happened to their houses? Sold below market value every time. Bethany's brother-in-law swooped in and bought 3 of them. Janet's voice was barely audible. I think she's running a real estate con game. I drove home with those words burning in my brain. Diana was waiting at our dining room table, case files spread out like a war room, her reading glasses reflecting the lamplight. How'd the kangaroo court go? She asked. Worse than I thought. We're not just being harassed, we're marks in a real estate scam. Diana looked up, and I saw that predatory gleam she gets when she's about to destroy someone's life. Then it's time to hunt. Bethany's next move was pure psychological warfare. She took our fight digital. 3 days after her rigged board meeting, I got a Facebook notification that made my blood boil. Someone had tagged me in a private group called Concerned Willowbrook Residents. The profile photo was a stock image of a gavel, because apparently Bethany thought she was Judge Judy. I clicked in and found my worst nightmare, photos of my truck taken from every conceivable angle, posted with captions that would make a tabloid editor proud. Commercial invasion threatens our community. Property values plummeting due to contractor infestation. How long before our peaceful neighborhood becomes a construction zone? She'd even created a fake property value chart showing home prices dropping 15% since I'd moved in. The woman had clearly missed her calling as a propaganda minister. But here's where Bethany made her first real mistake. See, Diana wasn't just any cop. She'd spent 5 years in the detective division specializing in financial crimes. While Bethany was playing Facebook games, my wife was following the money trail. Diana came home that night carrying a thick manila folder that landed on our kitchen table with a satisfying thunk. The smell of photocopied documents and highlighter ink filled the air. Your HOA president, Diana said, sliding papers across the table, is broke. The documents told a story that would make your head spin. Bankruptcy filing from 18 months ago. Law license suspended for misappropriation of client funds. Personal debt exceeding $340,000 in restitution payments to former clients she'd ripped off. But wait, Diana continued, producing more papers. There's more. Property records showing 3 recent home sales in our neighborhood. All sold below market value, all purchased by the same buyer, an LLC registered to one David Chen, Bethany's brother-in-law. She's running a real estate scam, I said, the pieces clicking together. Gets better. David flips these houses within 6 months for full market value, clean profit of $200,000 per property. I remembered something from my Army days. Our CO used to say that bullies always have patterns, and the pattern reveals their weakness. Diana had just found Bethany's weakness. Greed. This wasn't personal harassment, it was systematic financial fraud. And my detective wife knew that selective enforcement by HOA boards could trigger federal discrimination lawsuits. I started documenting everything with the precision of a crime scene investigator. Photos, timestamps, voice recordings of every interaction with board members. Created a spreadsheet tracking which neighbors had work trucks, boats, RVs, all the stuff Bethany ignored while obsessing over mine. Meanwhile, my business was bleeding money. The fake electrical complaint had triggered a domino effect. 3 clients canceled citing liability concerns. My Yelp reviews were getting bombed by fake accounts, all posting within hours of each other with identical language about unreliable service and safety violations. But Diana was building something bigger. She'd reached out to the previous harassment victims, the families Janet had mentioned. What she discovered made the whole scheme crystal clear. The Hendersons, harassed for 18 months over a basketball hoop, sold for $80,000 below market value. The Chen family, targeted over garden modifications, forced out after 2 years of legal fees, sold to David's LLC. Mr. Rodriguez, elderly widower bullied over his late wife's rose garden, sold and moved to assisted living, heartbroken. She's not just stealing houses, Diana explained over dinner. She's destroying families to do it. That's when things got personal for Diana. She'd sworn an oath to protect and serve this community. Bethany was preying on the vulnerable while hiding behind the veneer of neighborhood improvement. The community was splitting down the middle. Some residents approached me at the mailbox, whispering support and sharing their own Bethany horror stories. Others openly sided with her, terrified of becoming her next target. Then the anonymous notes started appearing. First one showed up on our windshield. Leave now or face consequences. Cheap copy paper, block letters written with a Sharpie that bled through to the back. Second note appeared in our mailbox. Your wife's job won't protect you forever. The third note crossed a line. Accidents happen to people who don't listen. Diana handled each note like evidence in a murder case: photos, fingerprint powder, the whole forensic treatment. But I could see the tension building in her shoulders, the way she checked the locks twice before bed. "She's escalating," Diana said, sealing the latest note in an evidence bag. "Harassment's not working, so she's moving to intimidation." "What's next?" Diana's jaw tightened. "In my experience, someone who threatens violence usually follows through. We need to be ready." The twist came when Diana's background check revealed that Bethany had done this exact same escalation pattern 3 times before: harassment, then threatening notes, then direct confrontation. Each time, the families had folded and sold rather than fight back. That weekend, I installed additional security cameras around our property, hidden ones this time, with cloud backup and night vision. Diana cleaned her service weapon at the kitchen table. A ritual I'd learned meant she was expecting trouble. Bethany's white BMW started appearing at different spots around our neighborhood. Never parked in front of our house, always just within sight. She was studying us, learning our routines, waiting for the right moment to strike. The smell of her expensive perfume lingered in our mailbox after each threatening note. White diamonds, the kind that screams, "I peaked in 1987. "She's planning something big," I told Diana. "Good," my wife replied, chambering around. "Let her come." Bethany's third attack was her most vicious, yet she went after our utilities like she was trying to freeze us out of our own home. I came back from a failed client meeting, another cancellation thanks to those fake Yelp reviews, to find a city utilities truck parked in our driveway. 2 inspectors were photographing our electrical meter with the intensity of crime scene investigators. "Mr. Delacroix, we're here about reports of illegal commercial power usage at this address." The complaint was a masterpiece of bureaucratic terrorism. Someone had claimed I was running an unlicensed electrical business from my home, drawing excessive power loads that endanger the grid. They threatened service disconnection pending a full investigation. Here's the kicker: Bethany had timed this perfectly. Diana was stuck in budget hearings at the county office, fighting for department funding while our household was under siege. The woman had done her homework, studying Diana's public schedule like a stalker. That night, Diana came home to find me surrounded by utility bills and legal documents, trying to prove I wasn't running some kind of electrical sweatshop out of our garage. "This is escalating faster than I expected," Diana said, still in her dress uniform from the hearings. Her badge caught the kitchen light as she loosened her duty belt. "She's not just harassing us anymore, she's trying to force us out through infrastructure." Diana's cop instincts were screaming. She'd seen this pattern before in domestic violence cases. When harassment doesn't work, abusers escalate to cutting off resources: water, power, heat, anything to make the victim's life unbearable. "There's something else," Diana continued, pulling out her phone. "I've been tracking her movements through traffic cameras. She's been following my patrol routes, learning my schedule. This isn't random harassment anymore." I felt that familiar chill. "You think she has inside information?" "I know she does. The timing's too perfect. Someone's feeding her intelligence about sheriff's department operations." The next morning, I hired Jennifer Walsh, an attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. Jennifer had that sharp-eyed look of someone who'd fought these battles before and won. Her office smelled like legal briefs and justified revenge. "Your case is textbook selective enforcement," Jennifer said, spreading our documentation across her conference table. "But there's something bigger here." She'd done preliminary research on our HOA board and found violations that would make a federal prosecutor salivate. The board hadn't held properly noticed elections in 3 years. Financial records showed unexplained expenses totaling over $200,000. Board meetings violated state sunshine laws routinely. "Here's what most people don't realize," Jennifer explained while reviewing our evidence. "HOA boards are corporations, and corporate officers can be held personally liable for discriminatory actions. When they target specific residents while ignoring identical violations by others, they're creating their own legal death sentence." Jennifer filed an emergency injunction that afternoon, demanding all fining actions stop pending a governance review. She also requested full financial disclosure and a forensic audit of HOA funds. That's when Bethany made her biggest mistake yet. Desperate and cornered, she reached out to someone from her past, a disgraced security guard named Raymond Kowalski, who'd been fired from 3 different companies for aggressive behavior. Kowalski had a side business providing security consulting that skirted the edges of legality. Diana's surveillance network picked up Bethany's phone calls to Kowalski within hours. As sheriff, Diana had access to resources Bethany couldn't imagine. When your wife runs the county's law enforcement, you tend to know when criminals are making plans. She's hiring muscle, Diana told me over dinner, her service weapon cleaned and ready on the table. This Raymond character has a history of intimidation, impersonating officers, assault charges that got dropped on technicalities. The plan, from what Diana's intelligence gathered, was simple. Intimidate me when Diana wasn't home. Make me believe I was dealing with real law enforcement. Force immediate capitulation through fear and fake authority. Bethany had even provided our home layout, Diana's work schedule, and detailed intelligence about when I'd be alone. She was coordinating this like a military operation. The HOA meeting that week turned into a war zone. I presented Jennifer's preliminary findings to a packed community center. The evidence of financial mismanagement and governance violations was overwhelming. Bethany's usual composed mask was cracking. Her hands shook as she tried to dismiss the evidence. Her 3 puppet board members looked like they wanted to run for the exits. "These are desperate accusations from a man trying to avoid legitimate fines," Bethany stammered. "Then explain the missing $200,000, I shot back. "Or the lack of proper elections for 3 years, Janet Morrison added from the audience. 2 of Bethany's board allies quietly approached me after the meeting. They were ready to vote her out if I could guarantee they wouldn't face personal liability. The rats were abandoning the sinking ship, but Bethany wasn't finished. In her mind, she was fighting for financial survival. Those restitution payments wouldn't pause for her HOA problems. She needed our house sold and David's money flowing. That weekend, I noticed an unmarked car parked at different spots around our neighborhood. Never the same location twice, but always within sight of our house. Diana's security upgrades captured license plates, facial recognition, the whole surveillance package. "He's studying us," Diana said, reviewing the footage, "learning our routines, testing our defenses." The air in our house felt electric with tension. Diana's hand never strayed far from her service weapon. I found myself checking locks obsessively, jumping at every unexpected sound. "When do you think he'll make his move?" I asked. Diana's smile was predatory. "Soon. And when he does, we'll be ready." The breakthrough came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, when Diana couldn't sleep and decided to dig deeper into Bethany's background. I woke up to find my wife hunched over her laptop at the kitchen table, surrounded by coffee cups and legal documents that covered every surface like evidence from a serial killer investigation. The blue glow from her screen made her look like some kind of digital detective from a crime thriller. "Marcus," she said without looking up, "you need to see this." What Diana had uncovered would have impressed the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Bethany Whitmore-Chen wasn't just broke, she was systematically defrauding our entire community to stay out of federal prison. The bankruptcy filing was just the beginning. Bethany had been disbarred for stealing over $400,000 from her legal clients' trust accounts. The State Bar Association had given her 18 months to make restitution or face criminal charges. That deadline was approaching fast. "Look at this," Diana said, pointing to a spreadsheet she'd created linking property sales to dates. Every harassment campaign coincides with her restitution payment schedule. The pattern was sickeningly perfect. Bethany would target a family, harass them into selling below market value, then her brother-in-law David would swoop in with cash offers through his shell company. 3 months later, the properties would hit the market again at full price. Clean profit margins of $200,000 to $300,000 per house. "She's not running a neighborhood," I said, the scope finally sinking in. "She's running a real estate chop shop." Diana nodded grimly. "And we're not random victims. Look at our property assessment. Our corner lot was appraised at $850,000, the highest value in the development. Prime real estate that David could flip for over $1 million in the current market. She specifically chose us because of my job," Diana continued. "Figured a sheriff would keep quiet to avoid the appearance of using official resources for personal disputes. She expected me to take the harassment and stay professional. The woman had calculated everything except Diana's detective instincts and my stubborn refusal to back down. Diana's investigation revealed the full scope of Bethany's operation. 4 families destroyed over 2 years. total fraudulent transfers exceeding $2.3 million, elderly residents forced into assisted living, young couples bankrupted by legal fees fighting bogus violations. But here's where Bethany's scheme became something much bigger than HOA harassment. It was organized criminal enterprise under federal RICO statutes. When I was in the Army, our intelligence officers taught us that complex financial crimes always leave paper trails. Diana had found that trail, and it led straight to systematic fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy charges that could put Bethany away for decades. "This changes everything," Diana said, closing her laptop with satisfaction. "This isn't a civil dispute anymore, it's a criminal conspiracy. I can justify opening an official sheriff's department investigation. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt hope instead of helplessness. We weren't just defending our home anymore, we were gathering evidence to stop a criminal organization that had been preying on our neighbors for years." Diana began coordinating with the district attorney's office that morning. The harassment we'd endured wasn't just evidence in our case, it was proof of an ongoing criminal enterprise targeting vulnerable homeowners. "How long before we can move on her?" I asked. "We wait for her to escalate," Diana said with that cold cop smile I'd learned to love. "Let her send this Raymond character to intimidate us. When she crosses the line into physical threats or assault, we've got her on conspiracy to intimidate law enforcement officers. That's a federal crime." Bethany thought she was forcing us out to save herself from prison. Instead, she was about to hand us everything we needed to put her there permanently. The prey was about to become the predator. Now that we knew we were dealing with organized crime instead of petty HOA drama, Diana assembled a team that would make Bethany wish she'd picked on someone else's family. First recruit was Detective Lieutenant Sarah Brennan, Diana's former partner from her detective days and the toughest cop I'd ever met. Sarah had spent 20 years taking down financial fraud rings and had that predatory gleam in her eyes when Diana explained Bethany's real estate scam. "This bitch is running a RICO enterprise out of a suburban HOA?" Sarah laughed while reviewing our evidence at our kitchen table. "She's about to learn why you don't mess with law enforcement families." Our attorney Jennifer Walsh became the legal coordinator, filing expanded lawsuits that included federal conspiracy charges. Jennifer had been salivating over this case since she realized the scope of fraud involved. The community organizer was Maria Santos, one of Bethany's previous victims who'd lost her family home to the scheme 2 years ago. Maria had been forced to move her elderly mother into a cramped apartment after Bethany's harassment campaign destroyed their finances. The woman had fire in her eyes and insider knowledge of how Bethany operated. The tech specialist was my nephew Danny, home from college where he was studying cybersecurity. Kid could hack into systems that would make the NSA jealous, and he'd been itching to use his skills for something meaningful. Diana got him a temporary consultant contract with the sheriff's department to make everything legal. Our war room was Diana's home office, transformed into something that looked like it belonged on a crime show. Evidence boards covered every wall, financial documents spread across multiple tables, surveillance photos organized by date and location. The smell of strong coffee and determination filled the air. Diana coordinated the criminal investigation through official channels. Her department would track the financial crimes, document the pattern of harassment, and build federal charges that could put Bethany away for decades. Sarah would handle surveillance of the property transfers and money laundering through David's LLC. Jennifer managed the legal battlefield, filing lawsuits that attacked every aspect of Bethany's operation. The HOA's governance violations, the selective enforcement discrimination, the conspiracy charges that could trigger treble damages under RICO statutes. She explained to us how these federal laws were designed exactly for situations like this, when criminals hide behind legitimate organizations to commit systematic fraud. Maria became our community intelligence asset, reaching out to other victims and potential witnesses. Her network of harassed homeowners provided evidence going back 4 years, documenting Bethany's escalating pattern of targeting vulnerable residents. Each family's story added another layer to the criminal conspiracy case. Danny's job was digital forensics. He legally accessed the HOA's poorly secured computer systems and uncovered deleted emails between Bethany and her accomplices. Financial records showing kickback payments from David's property flips, text messages coordinating harassment campaigns, digital evidence that would make prosecutors weep with joy. But the most important part of our strategy was psychological. Diana had profiled enough criminals to understand Bethany's narcissistic patterns. When cornered, people like her always escalate rather than retreat. The key was giving her enough rope to hang herself while documenting every crime she committed in the process. "She's going to send this Raymond character to intimidate us," Diana explained during one of our planning sessions. "When she does, we'll have multiple federal felonies on tape." We prepared our home like we were expecting a siege. Enhanced security cameras with cloud backup and facial recognition. Audio recording devices that would capture every word of threats or demands. Emergency protocols with the sheriff's department in case the intimidation turned violent. I coordinated the evidence collection system, making sure every harassment incident was documented with the precision of a court case. Photos, timestamps, witness statements, everything organized so perfectly that even a rookie prosecutor could get convictions. The community mobilization was crucial. Maria organized secret meetings at locations outside HOA boundaries, building a network of victims and potential witnesses. We established secure communication channels that Bethany couldn't monitor. Created a legal defense fund to help previous victims join our class action lawsuit. Diana arranged for backup officers to be positioned nearby during the anticipated confrontation. Not close enough for Bethany to spot them, but ready to respond within minutes if Raymond's intimidation tactics turned violent. She coordinated with the DA's office to have arrest warrants prepared in advance. Our timeline was precise. Wait for Bethany to escalate to physical intimidation. Document every threat and assault charge on multiple cameras. Coordinate simultaneous arrests of all conspirators to prevent evidence destruction. Present the complete criminal case to media for maximum public impact. The psychological preparation was just as important as the legal strategy. We knew this would get ugly before it got better. Bethany was fighting for her freedom. Desperate people make dangerous choices. But we had something she didn't. The moral authority of law enforcement and the systematic approach of professional investigators. "Remember," Diana told the team during our final planning session, "we're not just taking down one corrupt HOA president. We're stopping a criminal organization that's destroyed multiple families. Every piece of evidence we gather helps previous victims get justice." By the time we finished planning, Bethany's fake empire was already crumbling. She just didn't know it yet. The trap was set. Now, we just had to wait for her to walk into it. When Bethany realized her legal harassment wasn't working, she decided to get physical with my livelihood. I walked out to my truck Monday morning and knew immediately something was wrong. The engine turned over with a grinding sound that made my mechanic's heart sink. Popped the hood and found sugar crystals scattered around my gas tank cap like deadly confetti. But that was just the appetizer. By Wednesday, all 4 tires had been slashed with surgical precision, not random vandalism, but calculated sabotage designed to cost maximum money and time. Thursday brought a broken windshield, spiderwebbed by what looked like a ball-peen hammer strike right in my line of sight. My insurance company suddenly developed amnesia about covering vandalism claims. "Suspicious pattern of damage," they said. "Looks like targeted harassment, which falls under excluded circumstances." Translation: "You're on your own, pal. I was hemorrhaging money faster than a gunshot victim. Rental trucks, replacement tires, repair bills that mounted like a gambling debt. My business account was bleeding out while Bethany smiled innocently at HOA meetings." Meanwhile, Diana was playing the long game with the patience of a seasoned detective. Every act of vandalism got the full CSI treatment. She collected paint chips from my truck's scratched surface, photographed tool marks on my slashed tires, lifted fingerprints from broken glass with the precision of a forensics expert. The sheriff's department surveillance team had captured everything on camera from multiple angles. "She's using Carl Morrison," Diana told me after analyzing the evidence. "Bethany's paying him $200 per incident. We've got him on camera, DNA evidence from the broken glass, and phone records showing coordination." Carl was a small-time criminal who'd been arrested 3 times for property damage. Bethany had found him through her network of shady contacts and was using him as her personal vandalism squad. But here's where Bethany made a fatal mistake. She decided to destroy my reputation while she was destroying my truck. The smear campaign started on Nextdoor and spread like wildfire through social media, anonymous accounts claiming I'd threatened neighbors. Fake police reports alleging domestic disturbances at our house. Yelp reviews describing me as unstable and potentially dangerous. The anonymous tips to Diana's department were particularly vicious. Someone called Internal Affairs claiming Diana was abusing police resources to harass neighbors. Another complaint alleged I was using Diana's badge to intimidate contractors and steal business. "She's trying to get me suspended," Diana explained over dinner, her jaw tight with controlled anger. "Force me out of office right before the confrontation she's planning." The internal affairs investigation was a joke, but it tied up Diana's time and created the appearance of misconduct. Bethany was playing chess while most people were stuck on checkers. Our community was fracturing like a broken windshield. Some neighbors avoided eye contact when I picked up mail. Others whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by. The constant surveillance and vandalism had turned our dream neighborhood into a paranoid nightmare, but Bethany's escalation was exactly what Diana had predicted. My wife had studied enough criminal psychology to know that narcissists can't help themselves. When harassment doesn't work, they always resort to intimidation, and intimidation eventually becomes violence. "She's coordinating with this Raymond character now," Diana said, showing me intercepted phone communications. "They're planning something for next week when you're supposed to be out of town on that Riverside job." The Riverside job was fiction. Diana had arranged for me to appear to be 2 hours away, while actually being positioned in a surveillance van around the corner. Every detail of our fake schedule had been leaked through channels Bethany was monitoring. Sarah Brennan's surveillance team was tracking Raymond Kowalski's movements through the county. The man was studying our house like he was planning a military assault, taking photos of entrances, timing our routines, testing our security responses. "He's escalating too," Sarah reported during one of our kitchen table briefings. "Bought a fake police uniform, counterfeit badge, plastic handcuffs. This isn't intimidation anymore. He's planning to impersonate a law enforcement officer." That's when I understood the full scope of what Bethany had orchestrated. She wasn't just hiring muscle to scare us. She was planning to have Diana arrested by a fake cop while I was supposedly out of town, force her to comply with bogus charges or face real consequences. The woman was playing with federal crimes like they were parking tickets. Impersonating a police officer carries mandatory prison time. Assaulting a law enforcement officer doubles the sentence. Conspiracy to intimidate witnesses in a federal investigation could trigger RICO charges with decades behind bars. Diana's hidden cameras were positioned to capture every angle of our property. The audio recording system could pick up conversations from 50 feet away. Emergency backup protocols were established with response times under 3 minutes. "She's going to learn what happens when you threaten a sheriff," Diana said, checking her service weapon one final time. "Some lessons you only get to learn once." The smell of gun oil and determination filled our kitchen. Outside, Bethany's BMW made its nightly surveillance pass, headlights sweeping across our windows like a predator circling its prey. But she had no idea that the prey had become the hunter. The morning of March 15th started like any other day, except Diana and I both knew it would end with someone in handcuffs. I made a big show of loading my truck with tools and equipment, talking loudly on the phone about my emergency job in Riverside. Diana kissed me goodbye on the front porch where Bethany's surveillance cameras could capture the performance. To anyone watching, I was leaving my wife alone and vulnerable for the next 4 hours. What they didn't know was that I'd driven exactly 3 blocks before parking behind a Subway sandwich shop, where Sarah Brennan was waiting in an unmarked surveillance van packed with recording equipment and backup officers. "Showtime," Sarah said, handing me a radio headset. "Your wife's about to teach this fake cop the lesson of his miserable life." Diana was home alone, supposedly defenseless, wearing civilian clothes that concealed her service weapon and backup radio. Every room in our house had multiple camera angles. The audio pickup was so sensitive we could hear her heartbeat through the equipment. At exactly 2:47 p.m., an unmarked sedan with amateur police decals pulled into our driveway. Raymond Kowalski stepped out wearing a uniform that looked authentic from 20 feet away, but screamed fake to anyone who knew what to look for. The badge was wrong. Wrong font, wrong department, wrong everything. His posture was all wrong too. He moved like a bully, not a cop. "Here we go," Diana's voice crackled through our radio as she watched him approach through the window. Kowalski knocked on our front door with the aggressive authority of someone pretending to be in charge. Diana opened it with the perfect mix of confusion and concern that any innocent homeowner would show when police arrived unexpectedly. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Raymond Kowalski with County Enforcement. We've received multiple complaints about threatening behavior toward neighbors. I need to speak with you about your husband's recent activities." Diana played her part beautifully. "I don't understand." "What kind of complaints?" Your husband has been intimidating residents, using your position in law enforcement to harass people who file legitimate HOA violations. We have witnesses willing to testify about his threatening behavior. Every word was being recorded on multiple devices with crystal clear audio. Diana's training kept her voice steady even as this piece of garbage spun an elaborate fiction designed to justify what came next. I think there's been some misunderstanding, Diana said calmly. Perhaps you could show me your identification. That's when Kowalski's amateur hour performance started falling apart. He fumbled for a fake ID card that looked like it came from a novelty shop. Diana examined it with the trained eye of someone who'd seen thousands of legitimate law enforcement credentials. This badge number format doesn't match any local jurisdiction, she said quietly. And your uniform has several irregularities that suggest— Lady, I don't need to justify myself to you, Kowalski snarled, dropping the professional act entirely. Your husband's caused enough trouble in this neighborhood. Time for you to learn some respect. Diana took a step back, her hand moving instinctively toward her concealed weapon. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave my property. I don't think so. You're coming with me for questioning about your husband's harassment campaign. Interfere and I'll add obstruction of justice to your charges. That's when things got physical. Kowalski grabbed Diana's arm, trying to force her toward his fake patrol car. Diana resisted, using just enough force to make his assault clear on camera without revealing her training. She needed him to escalate further, to commit crimes that would put him away for years. Let go of me! Diana shouted, loud enough for the audio equipment to capture every word. Shut up and cooperate, Kowalski snapped, tightening his grip on her arm. Then he made the mistake that sealed his fate. When Diana continued struggling, Raymond Kowalski backhanded her across the face hard enough to split her lip. The sound echoed through our radio equipment like a gunshot. There, he said with satisfaction. Maybe that'll teach you some manners. Diana staggered back against our door frame, blood trickling from her mouth, her face already swelling from the impact. But instead of fear, I saw cold fury in her eyes through the surveillance feed. That, Diana said quietly, reaching into her jacket, was a very big mistake. She pulled out her real sheriff's badge, holding it where Kowalski could see every detail of the authentic law enforcement credentials he'd just assaulted. The color drained from his face like water from a broken dam. You just committed assault on a law enforcement officer, Diana continued, her voice deadly calm, while impersonating a police officer. On camera, with audio, in front of multiple federal witnesses. Kowalski stumbled backward, suddenly realizing he'd walked into a trap that would destroy his life. You're under arrest, Diana said, drawing her service weapon with the smooth precision of 15 years of training. Through our radio, I heard Sarah's voice. All units move in, suspect in custody, secondary arrests authorized. The net was closing on Bethany's entire criminal enterprise, and it was all being broadcast live to news stations across 3 counties. 2 hours after Raymond Kowalski was arrested for assaulting a county sheriff, Bethany called an emergency HOA meeting. She had no idea the FBI was already kicking down her brother-in-law's office door across town. The community center was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread through the neighborhood faster than wildfire something big was happening, and everyone wanted front-row seats to the destruction of their tyrannical HOA president. Bethany walked in wearing her best power suit, chin held high like she was attending a victory parade instead of her own public execution. She'd clearly convinced herself that Diana's arrest would end our resistance and prove her authority once and for all. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced to the crowd, I've called this meeting to address the resolution of our commercial vehicle violations and the removal of disruptive elements from our community. She expected applause. Instead, she got silence thick enough to cut with a knife. That's when I stood up from the back of the room, Diana beside me in her full sheriff's uniform. Her split lip and bruised cheek were visible to every person in that packed room. Actually, Bethany, I said, my voice carrying across the dead quiet space, we're here to discuss your arrest. The murmur that rippled through the crowd sounded like distant thunder. Bethany's confident mask flickered for just a moment before snapping back into place. I have no idea what you're talking about, Marcus. Perhaps you should sit down before you embarrass yourself further. That's when Jennifer Walsh stood up, carrying a briefcase that looked like it weighed 50 pounds. She moved to the front of the room with the confident stride of a prosecutor who'd never lost a case. Bethany Whitmore-Chen, Jennifer announced, you're about to be charged with criminal conspiracy, real estate fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit assault on a law enforcement officer. She opened her briefcase and began spreading evidence across the community center's presentation table like she was dealing cards in the world's most expensive poker game. Financial documents showing $4.2 million in fraudulent property transfers. Phone records proving coordination between Bethany, her brother-in-law David, and Raymond Kowalski. Bank statements revealing kickback payments that funded Bethany's lifestyle while she made restitution payments to avoid federal prison. "This is ridiculous," Bethany shrieked, her composure finally cracking. "These are desperate fabrications from people trying to avoid legitimate HOA violations." That's when we played the audio. Diana nodded to Danny, who'd set up a sound system that would make a rock concert jealous. Raymond Kowalski's voice filled the community center with crystal-clear quality. "Your husband's caused enough trouble in this neighborhood. Time for you to learn some respect." The crack of his hand hitting Diana's face echoed through the stunned silence like a whip snap. Then Bethany's voice recorded through phone intercepts. "Good. Maybe that scared her enough to make them pack up and leave. David's got the cash ready for a quick purchase." The room erupted. Neighbors who'd lived in terror of Bethany's retaliation were suddenly shouting questions, demanding answers, calling for her immediate removal from the board. "Order!" Bethany screamed, banging a gavel like she was still in control. "I demand order!" But order was the last thing she was going to get. Detective Lieutenant Sarah Brennan walked through the community center doors, followed by 2 uniformed deputies and a camera crew from Channel 7 News. The media had been tipped off about the biggest HOA corruption story in county history. "Bethany Whitmore-Chen," Sarah announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to intimidate witnesses in a federal investigation." The handcuffs clicked around Bethany's wrists with a sound that silenced the entire room. "This is a setup," she screamed as Sarah read her rights. "They're conspiring against me. I'm the victim here." "Ma'am," Sarah said with professional calm, "you have the right to remain silent. I recommend using it." As they led Bethany toward the door, Diana stepped into her path. The bruises on my wife's face were stark under the fluorescent lights, visible to every camera in the room. "Bethany," Diana said quietly, her sheriff's badge catching the light, "you picked the wrong family to terrorize." The news cameras captured Bethany's meltdown in high definition as she was loaded into the patrol car. Her perfectly styled hair disheveled, her makeup running from tears of rage and humiliation, screaming threats about lawsuits and revenge that only made her sound more unhinged. The crowd at the community center broke into spontaneous applause as the patrol car drove away. People were hugging, crying, sharing their own stories of Bethany's harassment for the first time without fear of retaliation. Maria Santos stood up on a chair and addressed the room. "We're free. After 4 years of terror, we're finally free." The local news led with the story that night. Corrupt HOA president arrested in multi-million-dollar real estate fraud scheme. Diana's professional handling of the investigation was praised by the district attorney, the FBI, and community leaders across 3 counties. But the best moment came when Janet Morrison was unanimously elected as interim HOA president, with her first official act being the suspension of all pending violation notices, pending a complete review. Justice, it turns out, tastes sweeter than revenge. 6 weeks later, I was sitting in the same community center where Bethany had been arrested, watching her plead guilty on the courtroom livestream to avoid a federal trial that would have destroyed what remained of her life. 4 years in federal prison, full restitution to all victims, permanent disbarment. Her brother-in-law David forfeited every property he'd bought through the scheme, plus interest and penalties that wiped out his entire real estate empire. Raymond Kowalski got 18 months for assault on a law enforcement officer and impersonating a police officer. The man who slapped my wife was now making license plates in a federal penitentiary, probably wondering how a simple intimidation job had ruined his entire existence. But the real victory wasn't watching our enemies get destroyed. It was seeing our community heal. The HOA was completely reformed under court supervision. Janet Morrison led a transparent board that actually focused on community improvement instead of personal enrichment. The first thing they did was use the recovered embezzled funds, nearly $400,000 that Bethany had stolen over the years, to establish the Willowbrook Justice Scholarship for local students pursuing law enforcement careers. Yeah, we named it after Bethany. The irony was too perfect to pass up. Diana received a commendation from the state attorney general for her professional handling of the investigation. Her re-election campaign didn't even need to campaign. She ran unopposed and won with 97% of the vote. Turns out people appreciate a sheriff who actually protects and serves her community. My business exploded with referrals from grateful neighbors who'd watched me stand up to corruption. I hired 3 local workers, bought 2 more trucks, and moved into a proper office space. The same insurance company that had denied my vandalism claims suddenly couldn't wait to offer me premium coverage at discount rates. The ripple effects went beyond our neighborhood. Diana's case inspired new state legislation requiring independent oversight of HOA boards. County prosecutors established a real estate fraud task force specifically designed to catch schemes like Bethany's before they could destroy more families. Other communities started reporting similar fraud rings to authorities, using our case as a template for fighting back against corrupt HOAs. Diana received invitations to speak at law enforcement conferences across the country about detecting organized crime hiding behind suburban respectability. But the moment that meant the most to me was 3 months later, when Maria Santos got to move back into her family home. David's forfeiture meant all the fraudulently acquired properties had to be sold back to their original owners at the prices they'd been forced to accept. Maria's elderly mother got to see her rose garden again before she passed away that winter. Mr. Rodriguez moved back from assisted living and spent his remaining years tending the flowers his late wife had planted. The Hendersons returned with their kids, who resumed playing basketball in a driveway where they no longer had to fear HOA harassment. Every family that had been destroyed by Bethany's scheme got their justice and their homes back. That's what real victory looks like. Diana and I started hosting an annual community barbecue in the exact spot where Bethany used to park her white BMW. We grill burgers, the kids play in sprinklers that no longer target specific driveways, and neighbors share stories without fear of retaliation. The smell of barbecue smoke and the sound of children laughing have replaced the tension that used to poison our streets. Last month, Diana announced her candidacy for State Attorney General. Her platform focuses on protecting communities from exactly the kind of corruption we faced. The woman who was once targeted for destruction is now positioned to protect thousands of families from similar schemes. And me? I'm still fixing air conditioners and building decks, but now I do it in a neighborhood where people aren't afraid to call for help. My truck sits in our driveway every night, legally and proudly, a monument to the fact that bullies don't always win. The security cameras are still there, but now they capture birthday parties and block barbecues instead of harassment and intimidation. Our doorbell rings with neighbors stopping by to chat, not process servers delivering bogus violation notices. Sometimes justice takes time, but when it finally arrives, it's worth every moment of the fight. Now I want to hear your story. Drop a comment below and tell me about your HOA nightmare, because if there's one thing I learned from this whole experience, it's that bullies only win when good people stay silent. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about ordinary people fighting back against corruption and winning. Because sometimes the underdog gets to bite back.